Before I start this lecture on ancient Hebrews and Israel, I really just kind of want to say something right away. If you study the current Israel-Palestine conflict, it's really, really common for people to say, oh, these people have been killing each other since biblical times. And while it's true that the Bible, the Philistines and the Jews fight each other, and that Palestine in Arabic is Philistine, and it comes from Philistine, if there's one thing that I can make really clear right now, is that what's going on now has really almost nothing to do with the time period we're talking about. And so right now what I'd like to advocate for you is not to push a political opinion about this idea, but I really want to make clear, I want to get it out of your head, that you're seeing an ancient biblical struggle. Because while the Bible does play a role and the claims to the land do come from the Bible on the Jewish side of things, keep in mind that in the 19th century, Jews were less than 10% of the population of Palestine, and it was called Palestine for hundreds of years after the destruction that was inflicted by Rome on Judea. And we'll be covering over a little bit of that. I just have this map right here showing you with Arabic equivalents for the region. But this map is not necessarily highly relevant to our discussion. I just wanted to kind of show you that this is the area now, that Israel is surrounded by Arabs. But the reason why Israel is surrounded by Arabs is because starting in the 19th century, Jewish migration from Europe started coming back, claiming the right to return. And this was called Zionism. And Zionists were not religious. The majority of them were not. The rabbis were actually against the idea. They said that Jews can't return to the Holy Land until the Mashiach or the Messiah comes. They didn't believe that Jesus was a Messiah, and many of the rabbinic establishment said that yes, Jews can go there, but to establish a homeland is to usurp the authority of God. And many ultra Orthodox Jews still believe this. Not all. But what ends up happening is Zionism. I mean, the first prime minister of Israel in 1948, and the current state of Israel was created in 1948, was a socialist. He was a socialist party and came out of communist circles as well. I'm not saying this to demean this. You might like socialism and communism. But what I'm saying is that he did not come out of a religious tradition, but out of a secular nationalist one. And he happened to have socialist leanings. And in fact, the Labour Party would dominate Israeli politics for some time. The PLO, the Palestinian Liberation Organization that fought, was not defined religiously and even had Christian Palestinians in their movement. It's only till the 80s that Hamas, an Islamic group, starts fighting more or less along the lines of religion, and that also more and more religious Jews were coming in and escalating the war in terms of religion. A kind of Islam versus Judaism thing has definitely its place within the conflict. But Islam comes not until centuries after Jesus. And so again, I want to take us back to where we're talking about ancient Israel. What's going on at the time and what happens now are two different things. And if you read the Bible or look at ancient Israel history to try to interpret what's going on now, you're gonna be missing a lot. And I really would like you to please not do that. If you're going to spend the time to care about this topic, then it's really important that you study it as it has occurred in the modern centuries and not in the past. So I just really felt like I needed to make that clear. Okay, so if you have any questions about that, let me know. I have read probably like 25 books or so on the current modern Israel-Palestine conflict, but that's another topic. So we're going to move along here, and we're going to talk about ancient Israel. And when you read your textbook, I really like the way the textbook outlines a kind of back and forth discussion about the wide range of views that are come out of what we know about ancient history. So remember what I talked about in some of my earlier lectures. The further you go back, the less information we have, and it's harder to pin down, right? We have tons of information of Judaism from later periods, but when we go back to the time periods that the Bible claims to be taking place, archaeological evidence and outside sources become smaller and smaller. When we're talking about some of the earliest writings of the Bible and the interpretations that the Jewish people have about their history. So again, if you're a religious Jewish person or a religious Christian who actually believes that the Bible is literal history, then that's what literal history is. It's all there, written down. But just like with Troy and what I talked about with the Iliad, archaeologists using linguistics and other aspects of history and scholarship find things will be a little bit more tricky when we combine all of these different sources together. So let me just give you an example to explain what some of these things are, okay? So the Merneptah Stele is important in that, and it's not talked about as heavily in the book, but this was a discussion of an Egyptian conquest over the land of Canaan and other smaller states by the Egyptian kingdom of the time. And it's mainly a celebration of victory over the Libyans, okay? But the last few lines boast about a campaign in Canaan. So here, if you look at this picture, we're going all the way down here, and here Israel gets mentioned, okay? And so this is really the first source we have from an outside source pinning down, actually saying the term Israel. But it doesn't really help us get a clear picture of what they're referring to when they say that. So here's an example. What does the Merneptah Stele say? It claims that Israel's defeated in the 13th century BCE. It says, Israel is laid to waste, his seed is not. Then it says the other Canaanite cities, then it's using the word hieroglyph for foreign land, referring to other Canaanite cities. Israel is thought of as a group of people, but it was not considered a city-state and not restricted to a geographical location. Now, how do we know that? My understanding by my professor in my ancient Israel class that I had at UC Santa Cruz is that the language used, they're signifiers that would indicate characteristics of like a city-state as opposed to like a group of people, okay? And so I don't know if I can think of in English language any equivalent for it, but I guess we could say if I said the word tribe, referring to one people, and then I said the nation state or empire of another, we know we're talking about somebody, but the word tribe is different than the word like nation state, right? I hope you follow that. So the language used appears that Israel's big enough of a group of people to be referred to and to boast about beating up, okay? But they're not so big as to even be counted as an actual city-state. So this appears they may have been a large tribal confederation or semi-nomadic, something like maybe the Arameans were. This is a little bit murky, but this is what we have coming out of this, okay? And so what's interesting then is that it's almost 400 years before the next inscription to mention Israel from an outside source. Okay, so they obviously existed then, but in obscurity according to the outside world, at least for the information that we have. Now, a scholar on all of this named Noel, he made a comment that I wanted to put out. He said, any communities in the region known now as Southwestern, or Middle Eastern is another term, Syria, Lebanon, Israel, Western Jordan, and the Palestinian Authority. He's basically saying the people in the Middle East who live in these places now might be designated Canaanite by an ancient scribe. So in other words, Canaan was kind of the blanket term used to identify all these other people by many ancient scribes. And it, later we'll see, like with Rome and Caesar, in the ancient world, when you had somebody, a foreigner, talk about another group of people, they weren't necessarily always so precise. Okay, and you want to keep that in mind. I'm going to stop here, and then I'm going to continue on with this lecture and this topic.